Some stories don't begin with a scream, but with silence, the kind that stretches across years, meals, and birthdays, so quiet it almost convinces you it's normal. But deep down, you know, love was never served to you the way it was to everyone else. If you've ever been the forgotten one at the table, this story is for you. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to their family stories. Like this video if it speaks to your heart. And share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every word. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I still remember the way the silver clinked against porcelain. My sister Madison's steak was always perfectly seared, resting gently beside imported asparagus and buttery truffle potatoes. Food delivered from Charleston's finest restaurants in sleek black bags my parents treated like royal offerings. Meanwhile, I was handed a paper towel with last night's cold spaghetti scraped from the side of the pot. My parents never looked at me when they slid it across the counter. Be grateful, Olivia. We don't like waste in this house. That house, warm lighting, polished wood floors, photos of Madison in recital dresses and tiaras, was never really mine. I lived there, I breathed the same air, but I existed like wallpaper, quiet, outdated, and easily forgotten. My name is Olivia Monroe. I'm 33 now, a personal chef and private caterer here in Charleston, South Carolina. You've probably never heard of me. And honestly, that's fine. For most of my life, I wasn't heard or seen at all. Madison is my younger sister by 3 years. But to my parents, she was a pearl, delicate, expensive, precious. I was the shell that cracked open to reveal her. They said Madison had potential. She needed culture, elegance. My parents took her out to dine at 5-star restaurants almost weekly, French fusion, Japanese omakase, tasting menus with white glove service. I stayed home, reheating pizza crusts and watching the shadows on the kitchen wall grow longer. At first, I thought I didn't mind. I loved being in the kitchen. I found peace in the hiss of oil and the rhythm of chopping vegetables. I taught myself everything: how to balance spice with acid, how a sauce could hold memory in a single bite. I even started cooking dinner for the family when I was 12. But they never noticed. Not really. They'd chew, nod, and then remind me, "You'll never cook like what we had last night." That was real food. Once, I asked to come along. Just once. I remember my mother tightening her pearl earring in the mirror, saying without looking at me, "Olivia, sweetheart, those places aren't really for people like you." I was 15. After high school, I didn't apply to college right away. I worked at a local diner, first washing dishes, then manning the flat top. I saved up and enrolled in culinary school without telling anyone. I knew if I did, they'd talk me out of it. They always did. "You need a real job," my father would say. "Something stable, respectable." As if food, real food, wasn't worthy of respect. Meanwhile, Madison went on to major in fashion marketing. She had a blog where she posted photos of herself sipping espresso or sitting cross-legged on silk sheets. Curated elegance, she called it. My parents called it brilliance. They gave her a new car, an apartment, paid her rent for years. I, on the other hand, was told I should be thankful they didn't charge me to live in the attic when I was starting my business. That attic, low ceiling, no AC, a hot plate and mini fridge, that was where I prepped meals for my first clients. I built my catering company from scratch. Word of mouth, neighborhood parties, holiday dinners. Slowly, people started noticing. Not my parents, of course. They didn't ask questions, didn't taste the food, didn't care when I told them I had a waiting list through Christmas. Madison, meanwhile, got verified on Instagram and was invited to restaurant openings just for smiling next to a soufflé. My mother called her a rising star. My father used the word sophisticated. They called me homey, sweet, unpolished. I let it go. I always let it go. Until one night, when they invited me over for dinner. A rare occurrence. I wore a simple dress. I brought homemade focaccia brushed with rosemary and sea salt. My hands shook as I placed it on the counter. Madison took one look and said, "Bread? That's rustic." They laughed. They served food catered by one of the restaurants she promoted, Tiny portions on huge white plates. I wasn't asked to sit next to Madison. They gave her the seat at the head of the table. I sat near the corner, by the window, where the draft came through. That night, as I walked to my car, holding my untouched bread, I made a quiet promise to myself. Someday, the table would be mine. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just worked. Quietly, steadily. I cooked in church basements, VFW halls, retirement parties, and school fundraisers. I catered weddings where no one knew my name and anniversaries where the husband cried into his soup. I poured myself into every dish. Not for applause, but because food, real food, has a way of speaking when words fail. And mine had failed me long ago. I rented a small commercial kitchen downtown with peeling tiles and flickering lights. The oven door had to be kicked shut. The fridge hummed like an old truck. But to me, it was holy ground. I'd arrive before dawn, the city still half asleep, and leave after dark, carrying the scent of roasted garlic and rosemary in my clothes. Sometimes I'd pass my parents' house on the way home. I never stopped. Madison's blog kept growing. Her followers loved her champagne shots and velvet blazers. Her polished captions about savoring life in the little moments. She was invited to food tours in Paris, Tuscany, Napa Valley. Not once did she mention where she learned to pronounce bechamel or that I taught her how to separate egg yolks from whites when she was 10. Not that I expected her to. What stung more was my parents' pride. They printed her blog posts and taped them to the fridge. My father called her a voice for modern elegance. My mother said she was finally bringing refinement to the Monroe name. Meanwhile, when I brought them samples of my seasonal menu, slow braised lamb, honey glazed carrots, fresh herb risotto, they glanced politely, picked at the edges, and said, "It's hearty, very humble." They didn't mean it as a compliment. One evening, after a long shift, I found myself standing in front of my parents' door. I had a basket of croissants I'd made from scratch. Not because I expected praise, just because I still had that flicker of hope that maybe this time, they'd see me. Madison answered. She looked at the basket. Then at me. "Oh, are these for Mom and Dad?" I nodded. She leaned on the doorframe. Her smile pinched. "They're on a call with my agent. Big news. I'm launching my own cookbook." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're writing a cookbook?" She tilted her head like she was surprised I didn't already know. "Yeah, just simple, stylish recipes for the modern woman. Clean ingredients, pretty photos. You know." I nodded again. I handed her the basket. She took it with 2 fingers like it might drip. I didn't ask to come in. That night, I stood in my kitchen and watched the dough rise again. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't understand how someone who had never burned her fingers in a hot kitchen, never cried over a curdled custard, or worked a 16-hour shift with aching feet, how she could claim the very world I bled into. But then, something inside me clicked. If they were never going to give me a seat at their table, I'd build my own, from the ground up, and I'd make it so good, so undeniable, that even they would want in. That's when I saw the ad. A national cooking competition, blind entries, no social media, no bios, no background stories, just pure food, judged by world-renowned chefs. The prize, $100 and the chance to open your own restaurant. Fully funded, with a mentorship from a Michelin-starred chef. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the screen. My hands trembled. I submitted the entry under the name E.L. Monroe. Just initials. No photos. No history. Just the food. Weeks passed. I told no one. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived. "Congratulations. You've been selected. You're a finalist. Prepare your signature dish. Travel details enclosed." I read it twice, 3 times. Then I stood very still in the middle of my kitchen and cried, not loud sobs, but quiet tears that slid down the cheeks of a woman who'd waited years to be seen. Who'd been fed cold spaghetti in silence and told to smile anyway. I didn't know then that one of the judges was Madison's idol. Or that the entire event would be televised. Or that my dish would trigger a memory in people I never met. All I knew was this. I was going to cook like my life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. The competition was held in New York. In a studio kitchen that felt more like a cathedral. High ceilings, steel countertops that reflected the overhead lights. Cameras mounted in every corner. It smelled of nerves and ambition. 10 of us stood side by side in crisp white coats. No names, no pasts, just heat, knives, and time. We had 2 hours. One signature dish. Tell a story with your food, that's all they said. Most contestants brought extravagance, dry ice, imported seafood, edible flowers balanced like sculpture. I brought what I knew. I made braised oxtail over creamy polenta, slow cooked with root vegetables, wine, and herbs, just the way I used to do for the neighbors on cold Charleston nights. I plated it with roasted shallots and a drizzle of reduction so rich it glistened like molasses under the lights. No tricks, no gimmicks, just warmth, patience, and memory. When I turned to present it, the room hushed. The lead judge, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes and a French accent, leaned forward. I knew that face. Everyone in the food world did. He was the one Madison always quoted on her blog. The one she once called, the oracle of modern cuisine. He took a bite, then another. He set his fork down and didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then he whispered, "Whoever made this understands the soul of food." The panel murmured. Someone clapped. I kept my head down. Later that night, in the hotel room, I got the call. I had won. They wanted to announce the winner live on the finale. Reveal the name. Invite the winner to speak. It makes good TV. They said. I said yes. The producers asked for a short interview clip to play before the reveal. I sat in front of a velvet curtain, camera close to my face, and spoke slowly. I'm not here to impress. I said, I'm here to remember. To remember the girl who was told to stay out of the kitchen because she'd just get in the way. Who ate scraps while others were served silver. Who was never asked what she dreamed about. The producer blinked. Anything else you want to say? I nodded. I looked right into the lens. Sometimes, the ones who serve in silence are the ones you should have paid attention to. The night the episode aired, I didn't tell anyone. I sat alone on my couch with a mug of tea. The sound low, my heart loud. They called my name. Not E.L. Monroe. Not just Olivia. Olivia Monroe, personal chef from Charleston, South Carolina. The camera cut to the judge's face. He was smiling. Then came the montage, the plate, his words, my story, and then, the twist I didn't expect. Phones started lighting up, messages rolled in, people I hadn't heard from in years. Old clients, strangers, reporters, and Madison. She posted on her story, shocked and, honestly stunned. That was my sister on TV tonight. She cooked for that man. The man, I can't believe it. But the part that made my breath catch? The next morning, I got a call from my mother. No hello, no small talk. She said, why didn't you tell us? I waited, then said, would you have cared? Silence. Then my father came on the line. That man, the judge, he said your dish made him remember his childhood. He said it made him cry. Another pause. Did you really win? I did. He cleared his throat. Your mother and I are proud. We'd like to come visit. Maybe try that stew. It was oxtail, I said. The same one I made for you years ago that you pushed away. They didn't remember. Of course they didn't. But the world did. The next day, I got a call from a well-known restaurateur in Savannah. He wanted to back my first brick-and-mortar location. Full funding, full creative control. He said, you've got something this industry's been missing. I signed the papers a week later. The restaurant would be called Harvest Table. Nothing fancy, just a place where real food meant something. Where people like me, quiet, forgotten, hardworking, could sit down and feel full. Not just in the stomach, but in the soul. Construction began that fall. As the opening date approached, I sent out invitations. I didn't send one to my parents. But they showed up anyway. They walked in 15 minutes before opening, dressed like they were attending a wedding. My father in his best navy blazer. My mother in heels that had no business on cobblestone. Madison wasn't with them. I spotted them through the front window as I was lighting candles on each table. For a moment, I stood still, watching them through the glass. My mother leaned into my father's shoulder, probably whispering something about the lighting or the wallpaper. I could imagine her voice. "It's quaint," she'd say, charming, in a rustic way. They didn't see me. When they stepped inside, the host recognized them instantly. I hadn't told my staff anything. But I didn't need to. My father carried himself like a man who expected the best seat in the house simply for showing up. My mother walked in with a smile. Like her presence was the gift. The host approached me cautiously. "There's a couple at the door. They say they're your parents." I nodded. "Let them sit at the bar. If they're willing to wait, I'll see what I can do." We were fully booked. Not a single table unclaimed. Not because of my name, but because of the food. Word had traveled. Reviewers had called it emotionally evocative. One woman wrote that the cornbread made her cry. Another said she proposed to her boyfriend over my beef stew. Every bite came from something I remembered. My parents sat at the bar, surrounded by strangers. They watched as guests filed in, some taking pictures, others whispering excitedly. My father's eyes darted around the room. My mother straightened her napkin 3 times. No one recognized them. For the first time, they were just people. I stayed in the kitchen, watching through the crack in the door. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted to breathe the air of my own success without their voices weighing it down. But when dessert was finishing at the last table, the host slipped into the kitchen again. "They're still here," he said quietly. "They haven't ordered. Just sipping water. I think they're waiting for you." I wiped my hands on my apron. I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway for a moment, smoothing back a loose strand of hair. Then I stepped out. They stood as soon as they saw me. My mother reached for me like she always did, with a hug that was more for show than comfort. "Olivia, sweetheart, this place, it's beautiful." I nodded, arms at my side. "Thank you." My father smiled. "We've been following the news. The reviews. That competition. What a moment. Why didn't you ever tell us you were that good?" I looked at them carefully. The soft lighting didn't hide the years as much as they thought. My father's hands had new spots. My mother's eyeliner trembled. I said softly, "Many times." My mother winced. "We didn't mean to ignore you, Olivia. We didn't know." "That's the problem," I said, not unkindly. "You never asked." They stood there, unsure what to say next. My father cleared his throat. "We were wondering if maybe you had a table. Just for the 2 of us. We'd love to taste what everyone's been talking about." I let the silence settle. I wanted them to feel the pause, the weight of years pressed between our words. Then I said it, calmly, firmly. "Reservations are for those who saw me before the world did." My mother blinked, her mouth parting slightly. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned back toward the kitchen, the weight in my chest surprisingly light. My legs didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't cruel. I was simply finished. They stayed a few more minutes, then left. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under the front door. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, folded once, in my mother's handwriting. She said she was sorry. For the meals I ate alone. For the birthdays overshadowed. For the times they called my work homey. Not realizing it was my heart they were talking about. She said they'd like to try again, if I'd let them. I placed the letter in my desk drawer and left it there. I didn't respond, not right away, maybe not ever, but I kept it, because even an apology, like a scrap, can carry something warm if it's honest. The next week, I added something to the menu. Braised oxtail, served over creamy polenta, finished with roasted shallots and wine reduction. And on the bottom of the menu, in small, quiet print, I wrote. I didn't hear from them for a while after that. No more letters, no calls, no unexpected visits. The silence didn't sting like it used to. It felt earned. Like space I had finally carved out with my own 2 hands. The restaurant found its rhythm. Thursday nights brought in a quiet crowd, older couples. Some with their grandchildren, others just happy to sit across from someone they'd known for decades. They liked the stews, the seasonal pies, the hush in the dining room where voices stayed low and warm. Sometimes guests would ask to meet me. I never said no. I'd step out in my apron, wipe my hands on a towel, and listen to their stories. One woman, maybe in her 70s, held my hand and said, "My mother used to make chicken and dumplings just like yours. I haven't tasted that since she passed." Her eyes welled up. That night, I cried in the walk-in fridge, next to the jars of homemade preserves. It was never about the food. Not really. Word kept spreading, not in a viral, flashy way, but steadily. Like water through soil. A few local papers wrote about the place. Then a regional food magazine. Then, one day, the network behind the competition show reached out again. They wanted a follow-up. "Where are they now?" they said. "Viewers loved you. Your story stuck." I said yes, reluctantly. The idea of cameras in my kitchen again made my stomach twist. But there was something inside me that needed to finish the arc. Not for them, for myself. They arrived with a small crew. 2 producers, and a familiar-looking interviewer I recognized from TV. They asked to film a dinner service. I let them. They asked if I'd talk about my past again. I agreed, with limits. "I'll speak about the food," I said, "not the wounds." They smiled, nodded, but I could see it in their eyes. They wanted the wounds. Pain sells. Still, I told my story in my way. I spoke about hunger, not the kind that starts in the belly, but the kind that starts in the soul. I talked about what it feels like to be overlooked in your own home. How every dish I serve now is a quiet answer to the question, "Do you see me yet?" They aired the segment 2 weeks later. It ran longer than expected. And then, the phone rang again. This time, it was Madison. I let it go to voicemail. 3 times. On the 4th call, I picked up. "Liv?" Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Hi, Madison. I saw the show," she said. "You were incredible. Thank you." A pause. "I didn't know it was that bad." She said, "I mean, I knew Mom and Dad favored me. But I thought, I don't know. I thought you were okay with it. You always seemed so calm." "That's the thing about silence," I said. "It doesn't mean everything's fine." Another pause. She exhaled. "I was jealous of you. You know, you had this quiet confidence. You never needed a stage." I didn't respond. She went on. "When you won that competition, and when Chef Moreau said your dish made him cry, I felt like a fraud. I take pictures of food I don't even cook. You are the real thing." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Liv. I should have stood up for you. I should have seen you." I closed my eyes. Forgiveness is a tricky thing. It doesn't always come in a grand moment. Sometimes it arrives like steam from a pot, slow, invisible, but rising anyway. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." She asked if she could visit the restaurant. Just her. No cameras. No fanfare. I told her to come on a Tuesday. The quietest night. She showed up early, wore jeans, no makeup, brought a small bouquet of herbs, thyme, rosemary, and sage. I figured flowers would be too predictable. She said with a sheepish smile. I seated her by the window. The same window I once sat near at our parents' house. Draft slipping in through the frame while she was crowned at the head of the table. I served her the oxtail. She ate slowly, every bite, said nothing. When she finished, she wiped her mouth, set down her fork, and looked at me with wet eyes. "I remember this," she whispered. "You made it once when I was sick. I didn't thank you. You were 12, I said gently. "I'm 30 now." I sat across from her. She reached for my hand. And for the first time in our lives, we sat at the same table. The Tuesday visits became a quiet ritual. Madison came once a month. Always at 5 sharp. Always alone. She never dressed up. Never brought her phone to the table. Sometimes, she'd bring me a little bundle, a mason jar of honey from the farmer's market, a bundle of hand-wrapped linen napkins, a book she thought I'd like. It wasn't grand, and it didn't need to be. We didn't speak much about the past. Not at first. She just listened, ate, watched me move through the kitchen with my team. Once, after dessert, she stayed behind to help fold aprons. No cameras, no captions, just us. It took time, but I started to believe her. The night we officially launched the Harvest Table Supper series. I invited her to read the opening toast. I wrote it, she delivered it, her voice trembled, but she didn't shy away from the words. This table, she said, was built not from praise or privilege, but from patience, from someone who fed others long before anyone thought to feed her. I watched her from behind the kitchen curtain. My hands were flour-dusted, heart steady. After the guests left, I found her at the edge of the dining room, wiping down the last table. I meant it, she said. I know. And I did. But the real test came one Saturday afternoon. A private event booking, anniversary party for a couple celebrating 50 years. They wanted the entire restaurant. My team prepped for days. The couple's children brought photos, music, candles. We transformed the dining room into a golden glow of memory and laughter. 30 minutes before guests arrived, the front door opened. It was my parents. I froze. They looked smaller than I remembered. Older, of course. My father's posture had softened. My mother's lipstick was the wrong shade, too bright for her now fading cheeks. I saw the announcement, she said quietly. The article, about the supper series, and the oxtail dish making some best of list. I nodded. We never apologized properly, my father added. Not in person. I folded my arms, waited. My mother's eyes flicked down. It wasn't just about the food. Olivia, we know that now. There was something in her voice, something brittle. Not pride, not shame exactly, maybe something in between. I used to think we were helping Madison succeed, she said, but the truth is, we only taught her to perform. You taught yourself how to endure. The dining room fell silent. I remember, she added, her voice thinner now, when you used to eat standing up at the counter. Never said a word. I wish I'd asked how that felt. You didn't want to know. I said, not angrily, just the truth. No, my father said, we didn't, and that's on us. They stood there, unsure what to do next. In the past, I would have rushed to fill the silence. Not anymore. I'm not angry, I said. I'm not trying to punish you. My mother nodded, eyes glassy. We understand. But you don't just walk into someone's life after leaving them behind. I added, that's not how healing works. My father's face fell. We were hoping we could sit. Maybe try the oxtail, properly, this time. The air stretched between us. Then I turned to the kitchen. I'll make you a plate, I said, but you'll take it to go. I wasn't trying to be cold. I was setting a table for myself now. And I had to protect the peace I'd fought so long to earn. They accepted the box quietly. My mother held it like something sacred. Before they left, she turned to me again. Did we ever do anything right? You gave me the hunger, I said, and I turned it into something you could never take credit for. They walked out, slower than they came in. That night, when the party ended and the last glass was cleared, I went into the kitchen alone. I opened my own to-go box. Same oxtail, same polenta, a dish I could make blindfolded by now. But tonight, I plated it with extra care. And I ate it sitting down, at the head of a table no one gave me, but one I built. Bite by bite. Some months later, I found myself standing in the middle of the dining room long after closing. The lights dimmed low, chairs tucked neatly under tables. The evening air had that late summer stillness. Like the world was holding its breath. I wasn't waiting for anyone. But I stayed. Not out of loneliness. Out of reflection. There are moments in life when you look around and realize everything that once hurt you has been turned into something solid. Rooted. Whole. I'd built this place with memory. With ache. With love so quiet it never needed a name. And now, it stood around me. Wooden beams. Warm lights. Walls that held laughter instead of silence. That night, I reached into the drawer of my office and pulled out the letter my mother had written months ago. The one I never answered. I unfolded it slowly. The ink was fading just slightly. But the words hadn't changed. I read it again, not for them. For me. To remember what I came from. Not to live there, but to honor the path I took leaving it. A few days later, I invited them back. Not as a test. Not as a gesture of forgiveness wrapped in a performance. Just as an act of honesty. Of maturity. Of understanding that people don't always become who you need them to be, but sometimes they become a little better than they were. I gave them a reservation under a different name. Told the host not to announce it. Just let them walk in like everyone else. They came right on time. Madison was with them this time, holding both their hands. They looked unsure, tentative, not like royalty arriving, but like children returning to a place they once misjudged. I greeted them at the table. "Welcome," I said, as if I'd never known them any other way. The meal was quiet. No dramatic apologies. No tears. Just bites, chews, swallows, long glances. At the end, I brought out one final plate. I hadn't told the kitchen. I made it myself. It wasn't on the menu. A single piece of toasted bread. A smear of garlic confit. A spoonful of cold spaghetti, twirled into a neat little nest. Dressed in olive oil, lemon zest, and shaved parmesan. Elevated, humble, familiar. I placed it in front of my mother. She blinked. My father looked confused. Madison smiled. "Barely," I said. "You don't remember this. But I do. I used to eat this while you were all gone at dinner. I'd add lemon to make it taste new." My mother's hand trembled slightly on the napkin. "I thought about throwing this memory away," I said. "But then I realized, I don't need to erase the past to heal from it. I can reimagine it, retell it." They didn't speak for a long while. Then, softly, my mother whispered, "It's beautiful." And she meant it. They each took a bite. It was quiet, but not the kind that wounds. It was the kind that listens. After they left, I stood at the window and watched them walk down the street together. Free silhouettes beneath the old gas lamps, fading slowly into the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I simply stood there, full in a way I never knew I could be. I don't need their approval anymore. I have my restaurant, my table, my story. And every night, when I light the candles, I remind myself, the girl who once ate scraps is now serving soul on fine china. And she is never, ever hungry again.